The knock came at 11:52 on a Tuesday, and I almost didn't answer it, because the woman standing there in scrubs at the end of a double shift has learned that nothing good happens after 11 p.m. that isn't already an emergency. It was an emergency, just not mine yet. 2 kids, soaked, a backpack with a broken zipper. A woman I'd never met standing behind them saying, "Are you Marin? Your address was in their dad's phone as home." It wasn't home, hadn't been for 5 months. I'm Marin Ellery. I run the trauma bay at a hospital in Charlotte, which means for 12 hours a shift I decide, in seconds, who gets seen first and who can wait. I'm good at triage. I did not see this one coming, and that's the part that still bothers me, because triage is supposed to be my whole life skill, and my own family blindsided me in my own driveway. Rewind 6 months, and you'll understand exactly how we got here. I have a brother, Cole, 2 years younger, twice as charming, half as reliable, the kind of charming that gets waitresses to comp the appetizer and gets sisters to comp everything else. Growing up, I was the fixed point. Cole missed curfew. I covered for him. Cole's rent came up short freshman year. My paycheck covered it. When our parents needed someone at every hospital appointment, every insurance call, every awkward family intervention, that was me, every time, because Marin's responsible had somehow become my entire personality by the time I was 17. Here's a thing about being the responsible one nobody tells you. It's not a compliment. It's a job description nobody hired you for, and nobody pays you to quit. For years I didn't mind. Being needed felt like a kind of love, until the year I realized it was actually just a kind of debt collection, and I was the only one making payments. 3 years ago I bought a house. Small, 2 bedrooms, a porch swing I installed myself the first weekend. It was the first thing in my adult life that existed purely because I wanted it, not because someone else needed it. Within 4 months, my mother had a key for emergencies. Within 6, my niece and nephew, Ivy, 10, and Sam, 7, had a standing room there, because Cole and his wife started treating my guest room like free daycare on weekends they wanted to themselves. I didn't fight it at first. I told myself I liked having them. I did like having them. What I didn't like was never being asked. Then came the 4th of July. Cole and Renee dropped the kids off Friday for just the weekend, and didn't come back until the following Thursday. 5 days. No call. When I finally reached Renee, she laughed, actually laughed, and said, "You're so good with them, though. We figured you didn't mind." That was the sentence that broke something loose in me. We figured you didn't mind. Nobody had asked. My silence had been quietly recast as consent, the way it always had been, for 31 years. So in January, I sold the house. Quietly, no sign in the yard, I told my family I was having work done, vague enough that nobody asked twice, because nobody had ever once needed to double-check whether I'd still be exactly where they left me. I was infrastructure. You don't inspect a bridge, you just drive across it. I moved 20 minutes away, into a place with my name on the lease and nobody else's key. I did not tell Cole the address had changed. I'm not proud of that. I also am not sorry, because I'd learned that if I explained anything in advance, it became a negotiation, and I was done negotiating things that weren't up for debate. 5 months of actual peace. I forgot what my own Sundays felt like. Then, in June, Cole called with an idea already fully formed, the way his ideas always arrived, pre-decided, my role assigned before I'd said a word. "Renee's parents are doing a week at the lake. We're going. The kids'll just stay at your place like always." I said no. Not let me check my schedule. Not maybe a couple days. No. Clean. Complete. Unfollowed by an apology. He laughed it off exactly the way he always had. "You always say that first. It's fine." I didn't correct him. I let the silence do what it needed to do. I had learned, finally, that explaining my no just handed people a rope to pull it back with. What I didn't know, what none of us knew yet, was that Cole had already told Renee's mother the plan was set. He'd already told the kids. He had built an entire week around an answer he'd never actually gotten. 10 days of pressure followed. My mother called twice a day. My father sent one text. Family shows up for family. An aunt I hadn't spoken to since a funeral texted me a Bible verse about selfishness, spelled correctly, which somehow made it worse. I put my refusal in writing 3 separate times, dated, time-stamped, unambiguous. The last one read, "I am not available. Please arrange licensed care. This is final." Cole's entire reply was a thumbs up. 6 days of silence after that. I told myself it meant he'd accepted it. Some part of me, the part that grew up in that house, knew silence in my family was never peace. It was just the sound of a plan changing shape where I couldn't see it. I found out how wrong I was on a Tuesday night, standing in my own driveway, looking at 2 soaked children and a stranger holding my old address like a piece of evidence. Here's what had actually happened, pieced together over the following week from a woman named Denise, the current tenant of my old house, and a very patient police report. Cole had dropped the kids at my old house that morning on his way to the airport, certain, the way he'd always been certain about everything involving me, that I still lived there. He hadn't checked. He'd never once needed to check, in 34 years, whether the world was shaped the way he assumed it was. Denise had answered her own door to 2 children she'd never met, holding backpacks and a note that said Aunt Marin, back by Sunday. She didn't panic. She's a hospice nurse. Calm under pressure is her whole profession too, it turns out. She got the kids dry, got their names, tried the number on the note. It rang through to a version of me that no longer existed at that address, because the number Cole had written down was 5 years old, from before I even changed carriers. For 4 hours, Denise worked the problem the way you work any crisis, with no clear next of kin, patiently, methodically, without panic, calling everyone she could think of, before finally, at hour 5, calling the police non-emergency line, not out of alarm, but because it was the responsible thing left to do. That's the part that still gets me. It took a total stranger doing my job, staying calm, triaging a crisis, refusing to improvise past what was safe, before anyone reached the actual me. By the time an officer traced the current owner of record and got my real number from county records, I was already being paged from a squad car sitting in my driveway. I want to pause here and ask you something, because I've been asking myself this for months. If your own no has ever been quietly rewritten into a yes, eventually, by people who love you, how many times did it take before they believed you meant it? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. What followed wasn't chaos. It was quiet, and quiet was worse. I brought Ivy and Sam home. Grilled cheese, cartoons, a real bed. Ivy, 10, asked me only one question while I tucked her in. Dad said you'd never actually say no. He said you just needed convincing. She wasn't being cruel. She was reciting a law of physics she'd been taught her whole life. That sentence did more damage to me than anything my mother ever said directly. Cole landed 2 days later to a police report with his name at the top of it. Reckless endangerment of a minor, a misdemeanor charge built entirely from his own decisions. No confirmed caregiver, no verified address, 5 days unreachable at a lake house, with spotty signal by his own admission. The first thing he said to me on the phone wasn't "Are the kids okay?" It was, "What did you do?" I told him the truth. I did nothing. I said no in writing, 3 times, and then I let the world respond to what actually happened, instead of what he assumed would happen. The family meeting came a week later, in my parents' kitchen, with the good tablecloth out, which in my family has always meant an ambush was coming, dressed as hospitality. There was a document on the table, 3 pages, a tab where my signature was supposed to go. It would state, under oath, that there had been a standing arrangement, that I'd agreed to keep the kids that week, and simply forgotten to update my address. One signature, and Cole's misdemeanor became a footnote instead of a record. My mother slid it across with 2 fingers, the way you'd offer someone a gift instead of a trap. 1 sentence, and this whole family heals. I almost signed it. I want to be honest about that. I sat with that pen in my hand longer than I'm proud of, because 30 years of training doesn't switch off just because you finally see the wiring. Then I thought about swearing, under oath, that my no had been a yes. I thought about a 10-year-old already being taught that lesson for free, without a courtroom required. I didn't sign. You could fix this with 1 sentence, my mother said, her voice going somewhere I'd never heard it go. I know, I said. And for the first time in my life, I'm going to let something stay broken instead of fixing it with a piece of myself. I stood up, and I walked out of a kitchen I grew up in, and the door closing behind me was so much quieter than 30 years of fear had told me it would be. Cole took a plea in the fall, 1 misdemeanor, probation, a parenting class, community service, no prison. I never wanted prison. I wanted the truth to be the thing that happened, instead of me, again, absorbing the weather so nobody else had to feel it. My mother hasn't called since. At church, apparently, I'm the daughter who let a stranger raise her voice about family business. I've made peace with owning a version of myself I don't recognize in other people's mouths. But here's the part nobody in that kitchen knows yet. You're about to. The week after I walked out, I opened 2 custodial accounts, 1 for Ivy, 1 for Sam, funded quietly, monthly, automatically, from money I'd have otherwise spent trying to keep everyone comfortable with my compliance. Renee is the only adult who knows, on 1 condition: my parents never find out it exists, because the second they do, it stops being a gift and becomes leverage, and I have spent my whole life watching this family turn resources into leverage. There's a card in Ivy's backpack now, laminated, with my number on it and 4 words under it. If you're ever stranded, call. She's used it once. Not stranded. Just wanted to tell me about a book she finished. I still drove over. We got ice cream. That's the whole point of the fund, really. Turning something they used to be able to bill me for into something I actually get to choose to give. Most weekends now, my phone stays quiet, and for the first time in my life, that silence doesn't scare me. It's just quiet. Nobody's inventory. Nobody's opening bid. Here's what I know now that cost me almost everything to learn. Nobody ever let my brother fail, so he never learned how to stand on his own, and everybody let me carry, so I never learned I was allowed to set something down. Family isn't the people who share your blood. It's the people who hear your no the first time, and choose to stand next to you in the rain instead of sending you out into it alone. If someone in your life treats your no like a starting offer, this is your sign. Stop negotiating. Tell me below where you're watching from, and I'll see you in the next one.